In the sprawling underbelly of Kepler Station, where alien flesh trades like currency and mercy is a luxury few can afford, a 12-year-old human girl named Maya discovers something that will shake the foundations of the galactic slave trade. What she finds cowering in the darkest corner of the abandoned warehouse isn't just another victim, it's a predator so ancient and powerful that entire star systems once trembled at the mention of his name. But now scarred and broken, the legendary Vorthak warrior, known as Shadowclaw, is nothing more than damaged goods, too old and wounded to fetch even a handful of credits at auction. The galaxy believes humans are weak emotional creatures unfit for anything but menial labor. They're about to learn why that's the most dangerous mistake they could ever make. Because when a human child looks into the eyes of a dying legend and sees not a monster, but a soul worth saving, she doesn't just rescue an alien wolf, she awakens something that will remind the universe why apex predators should never be underestimated, especially when they have nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Some bonds transcend species, some debts can only be paid in blood. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can unleash the fury of gods. Maya Chen pressed her small frame against the cold metal wall of the warehouse, her breath forming tiny clouds in the frigid air of Kepler Station's lower levels. The 12-year-old human girl had learned to move like a ghost through the industrial maze that sprawled beneath the civilized upper decks. Here, in the forgotten spaces between legitimate businesses and respectable alien society, the real economy thrived on things that decent beings preferred not to think about. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor behind her. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she ducked behind a stack of crates marked with symbols she couldn't read but had learned to fear. The Zeltharian slavers were making their rounds again, checking on their inventory before the next auction. She had witnessed enough of their work to know that being caught meant becoming part of that inventory. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her why she had risked coming to this particular section of the station. The food processors discarded perfectly good nutritional paste here, and if she timed it right, she could fill her small pack with enough sustenance to last several days. Maya had been living like this for 3 months now, ever since the transport carrying her and her parents to the agricultural colony on Demeter 7 had been attacked by raiders. The footsteps faded, and Maya allowed herself to breathe again. She moved carefully through the shadows, her bare feet silent on the metal grating. The warehouse ahead looked abandoned, its loading dock sealed, and its security lights dark, perfect for scavenging without interference. Maya slipped through a gap in the security fence and made her way to the rear entrance. The door had been damaged in some long-ago accident, leaving a space just wide enough for a determined child to squeeze through. The interior was darker than the corridor outside, and she had to wait for her eyes to adjust before venturing further. The smell hit her first. It was wrong somehow, mixing the metallic scent of blood with something wild and dangerous that made her primitive hindbrain scream warnings. But Maya had learned to ignore such warnings. In her short life, danger had become as constant as breathing. She moved deeper into the warehouse, following the faint glow of emergency lighting toward what looked like a storage area. Rows of containers lined the space, each one equipped with basic life support systems. Maya's blood ran cold as she realized what she was looking at. This was a holding facility for living cargo. Most of the containers were empty, their occupants already sold and shipped to whatever fate awaited them. But as Maya crept between the rows, she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. It was barely audible, a sound somewhere between a whimper and a growl, filled with such pain and despair that it made her chest ache. The sound came from a container at the far end of the row. Unlike the others, this one looked damaged. Deep gouges scored its walls, and one corner had been reinforced with crude welding. The life support system flickered intermittently, suggesting it was on the verge of failure. Maya approached cautiously. A small observation window allowed her to peer inside, though the dim lighting made it difficult to see clearly. At first she thought the container was empty. Then something moved in the shadows, and she found herself staring into a pair of eyes that seemed to hold the accumulated pain of centuries. The creature inside was massive, even curled up as it was in the cramped space. Its body was covered in thick fur that might once have been silver but was now matted with blood and grime. Scars crisscrossed its hide, some old and healed, others still seeping. One of its legs was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken and never properly set. But it was the eyes that held Maya transfixed. They were intelligent, far more so than any animal she had ever seen, and in their depths she saw something she recognized from her own reflection during the darkest moments of the past 3 months, the look of someone who had lost everything and was waiting to die. The creature noticed her watching and raised its head slightly. Maya gasped as she got a better look at its face. It was vaguely wolf-like, but larger and more angular, with pronounced canine teeth and a muzzle designed for tearing flesh. This was a predator, a killer shaped by evolution and refined by intelligence. And yet, as their eyes met through the grimy transparisteel, Maya felt no fear. Instead, she felt a connection that transcended species. Here was another lost soul, another victim of the cruel machinery that ground up the innocent and the weak. The creature's breathing was labored, and Maya could see that its life support system was indeed failing. In a few hours, maybe less, this magnificent being would suffocate in its metal prison. Maya looked around the warehouse, her mind racing. She had no tools, no weapons, no allies. She was just a 12-year-old human girl with nothing but the clothes on her back and a fierce determination that had kept her alive when stronger beings had given up. But as she watched the light in those ancient eyes grow dimmer, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She was going to save him. The lock on the container was electronic, far beyond her ability to bypass. But the damage to the unit had warped the frame, creating gaps between the panels. Maya searched the warehouse until she found a piece of metal debris sturdy enough to serve as a prying tool. It took nearly an hour of careful work, her small hands growing raw and bloody from the effort. But eventually she managed to widen one of the gaps enough to reach inside. The creature watched her work without moving, its breathing shallow but steady. When Maya finally managed to get her arm through the opening, she spoke for the first time. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast space. "I know you probably can't understand me, but I want you to know that someone cares." To her amazement, the creature's ears twitched at her words. It shifted slightly, bringing its massive head closer to where she was working. Maya felt warm breath on her arm and realized that the being was smelling her, learning her scent. The gap was still too small for the creature to escape through, but Maya had a different plan. She had noticed that the life support system was connected to the container through external coupling. If she could disconnect it and find a way to drag the entire unit outside, she might be able to get help from someone with better tools. Working by feel, Maya traced the coupling until she found what felt like a manual release. The mechanism was stiff from disuse, and she had to put her full weight behind it before it finally gave way with a hiss of escaping air. The creature inside went very still as the life support shut down, and Maya realized she had just made their situation much more urgent. She grabbed the release handle on the container and pulled with all her strength. The unit was heavy, designed to be moved by machinery, not by a child. But desperation lent Maya strength she didn't know she possessed. Inch by inch, she dragged the container toward the warehouse entrance. The work was exhausting, and she had to stop frequently to rest. During one of these breaks, she heard something that made her heart skip. The creature inside was making a new sound, a deep rumbling that she realized was some form of communication. It was trying to talk to her. "I'm still here," she whispered back, pressing her face against the observation window. "Just hold on a little longer." The alien's eyes focused on her with what looked like surprise. It made the rumbling sound again, more urgently this time. Maya wished desperately that she could understand what it was trying to say. It took another hour to get the container to the warehouse entrance. By then, Maya's strength was nearly gone, and she could see that the creature inside was struggling for each breath in the increasingly stale air. She needed to find someone who could help, but the thought of leaving her new friend alone, even for a moment, that was when she heard voices outside. Maya's blood went cold as she recognized the harsh tones of Zeltharian traders. They were returning to check on their inventory, and they would not be pleased to find that someone had been tampering with their property. Maya looked at the container, then at the warehouse entrance. She could hide, wait for them to leave, and hope that the creature inside could survive a few more hours. Or she could do something incredibly stupid and incredibly brave. She chose bravery. Maya stepped outside the warehouse and walked directly toward the approaching Zeltharians. There were 3 of them, their reptilian features twisted with the casual cruelty that came from treating sentient beings as commodities. The leader, a scarred veteran with cybernetic implants covering half his head, noticed her first. "Well, what have we here?" he hissed in accented standard. "A little human mouse, all alone in the dark places. You should not be here, small one. These are not safe spaces for your kind." "There's someone dying in there," Maya said, pointing back toward the warehouse. Her voice was steady, despite the terror clawing at her insides. "He needs help." The Zeltharian's eyes narrowed. Someone or something. And why would a little human care about the fate of alien flesh? "Because it's the right thing to do," Maya replied simply. The trader laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "The right thing? Child, you are in the wrong part of the galaxy if you believe in such luxuries. Here, the only right thing is profit." He gestured to his companions, who moved to flank Maya. "Still, perhaps this is fortunate. We have been short one item for tomorrow's auction. A young human would fetch a decent price, especially one with such interesting moral convictions." The buyers find that amusing. Maya's heart hammered as the aliens closed in, but she forced herself to stand her ground. "The creature in the container is dying. If you don't help him, you'll lose whatever he's worth." "Creature?" The leader paused, suddenly interested. "You mean the old Vorthak?" "Ha! That piece of damaged goods is worth nothing. Too old, too scarred, too broken to be of use to anyone. We have been trying to decide whether to space him or simply let nature take its course." "Vorthak." Maya filed the word away, sensing it was important. "Then let me have him. If he's worthless to you, what difference does it make?" The Zeltharian considered this, his head tilted in reptilian curiosity. "An interesting proposition. But what could you possibly offer in exchange?" "You have nothing we want except yourself, and that we can simply take." Maya's mind raced, searching for anything that might serve as leverage. Then she remembered something she had overheard in the station's upper levels, back when she still had parents to protect her from such knowledge. "The station authorities have been cracking down on unlicensed trading," she said carefully. "I heard they're planning raids on the lower levels. Someone who knew where those raids were going to happen could make a lot of money warning the right people." It was a complete fabrication, but Maya sold it with the desperate conviction of someone with nothing left to lose. The Zeltharian cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on her, analyzing her words for deception. "And you would know such things how, little mouse?" "My parents worked in station administration before they died," Maya lied smoothly. "I still have access to their communication codes. Information like that has to be worth one broken alien nobody wants anyway." The trader was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. Maya held her breath, knowing that her life and the life of the creature in the container depended on his answer. Finally, he laughed again. "You know what? I find myself entertained by your audacity." "Very well, little mouse. You may have your worthless pet, but in return you will provide us with 3 pieces of useful intelligence about station security operations. Fail to deliver, and we will collect our debt from your flesh." Maya nodded quickly, knowing she was signing her own death warrant, but unable to think of any alternative. "Deal. Excellent." The Zeltharian gestured to his companions. "Break open the container. Let us see if the old wolf survives his rescue. As the aliens moved toward the warehouse, Maya felt a mixture of triumph and terror. She had done it. She had actually done it. But now she had 3 days to come up with intelligence she didn't have, or both she and her new friend would end up as entertainment in the station's fighting pits. The sound of metal being torn echoed from the warehouse, followed by a roar that made Maya's bones vibrate. Whatever she had just rescued, it was very much alive and very, very angry about its captivity. Maya squared her shoulders and walked toward the sound. She had made her choice, and now she would have to live with the consequences. But as she stepped into the warehouse and saw the massive alien warrior struggling to rise from the ruins of his prison, his ancient eyes finding hers across the space, she knew she would make the same choice again. Some things were more important than safety. Some bonds were forged in moments of desperate compassion. And sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change the course of worlds. Maya was about to discover just how true that was. The creature that emerged from the shattered remains of the container was nothing like Maya had imagined. In the confines of his metal prison, she had seen only glimpses of his true size and power. Now, as he slowly pulled himself upright on 3 good legs, she realized she was looking at something that belonged in legends. He stood nearly 3 meters at the shoulder when fully erect, his body built like a fusion of wolf and warrior. Thick muscle moved beneath his scarred hide, and despite his obvious injuries, there was a predatory grace to his movements that spoke of countless battles survived. His broken leg hung uselessly, but he compensated with the fluid balance of a born fighter. The Zeltharian traders took an involuntary step backward as the alien fixed them with a stare that could have melted hull plating. When he spoke, his voice was a rumbling bass that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. The words formed in heavily accented but perfectly understandable standard. "I remember you," he said, addressing the lead trader, Kreshtar the flesh merchant. "You were smaller when last we met, and your cybernetics fewer. The years have not improved your stench." Kreshtar's scaled hide flushed a sickly yellow, the Zeltharian equivalent of going pale. "Shadowclaw," he whispered, the name carrying weight that made even his companions take another step back. "We thought," the report said, "you were dead." The massive alien's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing teeth designed to tear through armor plating. "Death has been trying to claim me for 300 years, merchant. It has yet to succeed, though recent events have given it better chances." Maya found herself caught between fascination and terror. This was clearly no ordinary prisoner. The way the slavers reacted to him, the casual mention of centuries, the aura of barely contained violence that surrounded him like a field effect, she was beginning to understand that she had stumbled into something far larger than a simple rescue. "The girl," Shadowclaw continued, his ancient eyes finding Maya. "She freed me from your cage?" "She bargained for your freedom," Kreshtar replied carefully, "though I suspect she had no idea what she was purchasing." Shadowclaw studied Maya for a long moment, his gaze intense but not unkind. When he spoke again, it was in a different tone, one that carried respect and something that might have been wonder. "A human child. I have heard of your species but never encountered one directly. They say your kind are weak, soft creatures suited only for menial labor and entertainment." He paused, considering. Yet this small one saw a dying enemy and chose mercy over safety. "Fascinating? Enemy?" Maya asked, finding her voice despite her awe. "To most of the galaxy, yes. I am Vorthak, child. We are the apex predators of the spiral arm, the nightmares that even nightmares fear. For millennia, my people have been warriors, conquerors, the sword arm of any who could afford our services. I personally have destroyed star systems, broken empires, and sent entire species fleeing into the dark between the stars." Maya absorbed this information with the strange calm that had carried her through the past 3 months of horror. "But not anymore?" Shadowclaw's expression grew distant, and Maya caught a glimpse of pain that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. No, small one, not anymore. My people are extinct, victims of our own pride and a war we could not win. I am the last, kept alive these past 50 years only as a curiosity for those with exotic tastes in gladiatorial entertainment. The warehouse fell silent, except for the distant hum of the station's systems. Maya processed what she had just learned, her 12-year-old mind struggling to comprehend the magnitude of loss the creature before her had experienced. To be the last of your kind, to carry the weight of an entire species' extinction, she couldn't imagine such loneliness. "I'm sorry," she said simply, and meant it. Shadowclaw's head tilted, studying her with renewed interest. "You apologize for something that is not your fault, to someone who has caused more death than you could comprehend." "Why?" "Because you're hurting," Maya replied, "and because nobody should have to be alone." For a moment, something flickered in the ancient warrior's eyes. Then he looked away, as if the emotion was too raw to bear scrutiny. "You should not have freed me, child. The debt of life is sacred among my people, and now you have bound us together in ways you cannot understand." Kreshtar chose that moment to interrupt, his commercial instincts overriding his fear. "Touching as this reunion is, we have business to conclude. The girl owes us information, and you, old wolf, are no longer our concern." Shadowclaw's attention snapped back to the slaver, and the temperature in the warehouse seemed to drop several degrees. "You dare make demands in my presence, flesh merchant? Have the years made you forget what I am capable of? You are crippled and alone." Kreshtar shot back, though his voice wavered slightly. "Your people are dust, your legend is forgotten by all but historians, and you are too old and broken to be worth even the cheapest gladiator contract. What can you do to us?" Maya watched as Shadowclaw slowly turned his full attention to the Zeltharian trader, and she realized she was about to witness something that would be burned into her memory forever. "What can I do?" Shadowclaw repeated, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any roar. "Allow me to demonstrate." What happened next was almost too fast for Maya's eyes to follow. Despite his broken leg, Shadowclaw moved with blinding speed, covering the distance to Kreshtar in a single bound. His massive claws, each one as long as Maya's forearm, extended from his fingertips with a sound like sword blades being drawn. The lead slaver had time for one strangled cry before those claws closed around his throat. Shadowclaw lifted him effortlessly from the ground, the Zeltharian's feet kicking uselessly in the air. "I am Shadowclaw of the 10th Pack, breaker of the hegemony, the last hunt of the Vorthak," the ancient warrior intoned, each word dripping with the authority of absolute power. "I have ended civilizations with these claws. I have made heroes weep, and tyrants beg for mercy they would never receive. And you, miserable little trafficker in suffering, ask what I can do?" The other two Zeltharians reached for their weapons, but froze as Shadowclaw's free hand gestured casually in their direction. Maya heard the distinctive whine of energy weapons powering down and realized that somehow, impossibly, he had disabled their equipment without even looking at them. "Your companion lives only because my young friend here has shown me mercy," Shadowclaw continued, his grip tightening slightly around Kreshtar's neck. "She has reminded me that there are still those in this galaxy worth protecting, worth fighting for. But make no mistake, if you threaten her, if you so much as think of collecting on the debt she foolishly offered, I will show you why my name was once whispered in fear across 10,000 worlds." He released the traitor, who collapsed to the ground, gasping and clawing at his throat. "The girl's debt is void. You will leave this place and never return. If I see any of you again, if I hear that you have so much as spoken her name, I will finish what I started here today. And before you die, you will remember why the Vorthak were feared above all other species in this galaxy." The three Zeltharians scrambled for the exit, supporting their leader between them. As they reached the doorway, Kreshtar turned back one last time, his eyes wild with fear and rage. You cannot protect her forever, old wolf. And when you fail, when you finally die, as you should have decades ago, she will pay for this humiliation tenfold. Shadowclaw's response was a roar that shook dust from the warehouse ceiling. Then I suppose I will simply have to ensure that I do not die, won't I? The slavers fled, their footsteps echoing through the corridors until they faded into silence. Maya found herself alone with a legendary warrior who had just declared his intention to become her protector. Whether she wanted one or not, "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I made the deal. I should have been the one to face the consequences." Shadowclaw settled back on his haunches, favoring his injured leg. Now that the immediate threat was gone, Maya could see how much the confrontation had cost him. His breathing was labored, and fresh blood seeped from several of his wounds. "You are young," he said after a moment. Too young to understand the true nature of creatures like Kreshtar. He would have taken your information and then sold you anyway, probably to someone with particularly unpleasant tastes. Your innocence, while admirable, would have been your doom. "And now?" Maya asked. "Now you are under my protection, whether you wish it or not. Among my people, the debt of life is absolute. You saved me when I was prepared to die with dignity, and in doing so, you have bound my remaining existence to yours." Maya considered this, trying to understand the implications. What does that mean exactly? Shadowclaw was quiet for a long time, his ancient eyes staring at something far beyond the walls of the warehouse. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries of loss and loneliness. "It means, young Maya, yes, I heard them speak your name, that you have gained a guardian who will die before allowing harm to come to you. It means that the last warrior of the Vorthak has found something worth protecting again after 50 years of empty existence. It means that your act of kindness has given an old soldier one final mission and perhaps the chance to die with honor instead of slowly wasting away in a cage." "But what if I don't want that?" Maya asked, though she wasn't sure she meant it. The thought of having someone strong enough to protect her, someone who cared enough to risk everything for her safety, was both terrifying and incredibly appealing. "Then you should have thought of that before you saved my life," Shadowclaw replied with what sounded like dry humor. "The debt is binding, child. Even if I wished to abandon you, which I do not, my honor would not permit it." Maya walked closer to the massive alien, no longer afraid despite everything she had just witnessed. Up close, she could see that his injuries were even worse than she had initially thought. The broken leg was just the beginning. Scars covered his body like a roadmap of violence, and she could see places where his thick fur had never grown back over particularly severe wounds. "You're hurt," she said, stating the obvious but needing to voice her concern. "I have been hurt for a very long time," he replied. "Physical wounds heal, or they don't. It is the other kind of damage that proves more persistent." Maya understood that he was talking about more than just battle scars. The loneliness of being the last of his kind, the weight of all those deaths on his conscience, the gradual erosion of purpose that came from outliving everything you had once valued. These were wounds that ran deeper than flesh and bone. "We should get you medical attention," she said practically. "That leg needs to be set properly, and some of those cuts look infected." Shadowclaw made that rumbling sound again, and Maya realized it was his version of laughter. "Child, do you know what medical care costs on a station like this? Even basic first aid would require credits we do not possess." Maya's face fell as she realized the truth of his words. She had been living as a scavenger for months, barely surviving on scraps and whatever she could find in the garbage. She had no money, no resources, no way to help someone who had just risked everything to protect her. "There might be another way," she said slowly, an idea beginning to form. "I know someone who might be willing to help, but it would mean trusting a human. After what you have shown me today, young Maya, I find myself inclined to give your species the benefit of the doubt. Maya smiled, feeling something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. His name is Dr. Harrison. He runs a free clinic in the mid-levels for people who can't afford proper medical care. He's not supposed to treat aliens without proper documentation, but he doesn't always follow the rules too closely. And you believe this human would be willing to aid a Vorthak warrior, even knowing what I am? I think, Maya said carefully, that Dr. Harrison would be willing to help someone who needed healing, regardless of species. But we'd have to be careful. The clinic is in a better part of the station, where security actually pays attention to what's going on. Shadowclaw struggled to his feet, testing his balance on 3 legs. Then we should go before my strength fails completely. I find myself curious to meet this healer of yours. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Maya couldn't help but marvel at the strange turn her life had taken. Just hours ago, she had been a lone child scavenging for survival in the darkest corners of space. Now, she was the sworn protector of a legendary warrior embarking on a journey that would either lead to salvation or destruction for both of them. But as she looked up at Shadowclaw's scarred but noble face, she felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the station's heating systems. For the first time since losing her parents, she wasn't alone. And judging by the way the ancient warrior looked at her, neither was he. Together, they stepped out into the corridors of Kepler Station, a 12-year-old human girl and the last of the Vorthak, bound by honor and necessity into an alliance that would soon shake the foundations of the galactic underworld. Behind them, the empty container sat forgotten in the warehouse, its metal walls still warm from housing a legend. But ahead of them lay challenges that would test the limits of courage, loyalty, and the strange bond that had formed between 2 lost souls from different worlds. The adventure was just beginning, and neither Maya nor Shadowclaw had any idea how far it would take them or what they would have to sacrifice to survive it. The journey to the mid-levels of Kepler Station proved more treacherous than Maya had anticipated. Shadowclaw's massive frame and distinctive appearance made stealth nearly impossible, and his injured leg forced them to move much slower than she would have preferred. Every corridor they traversed felt like walking through a minefield of potential discovery. Maya had taken the lead, her small size and knowledge of the station's maintenance tunnels allowing them to avoid the main thoroughfares where security cameras and patrol drones kept constant watch. Even so, they had several close calls with station personnel, forcing them to hide in supply closets and emergency shelters while uniformed figures passed by just meters away. The ancient Vorthak warrior followed her guidance without complaint. Sweat matted his fur despite the cool air of the tunnels, and she noticed that he left small drops of blood in their wake. His injuries were worse than he was willing to admit, and she feared that pride might kill him before they reached help. "Just a little further," she whispered as they paused at a junction between 2 service corridors. "Harrison's clinic is in section C7, about 3 levels up from here." Shadowclaw leaned heavily against the wall, his breathing labored. "Tell me about this healer of yours," he rumbled quietly. "What manner of human risks his livelihood to aid strangers?" Maya considered the question as she checked the corridor ahead for signs of movement. Dr. Marcus Harrison was one of the few bright memories from her time on the station, a beacon of kindness in a place that seemed designed to crush such qualities. "He's different from most of the humans here," she said finally. "He came to Kepler Station about 5 years ago, right after his wife died. He could have set up a practice in the core worlds, made a fortune treating wealthy patients. Instead, he decided to help people who had nowhere else to turn." She peeked around the corner, confirming that the way was clear before motioning for Shadowclaw to follow. "My mom brought me to him once when I got sick from eating contaminated rations. He didn't ask for payment, didn't demand to see our transit documents, just made me better and told us to be more careful about food safety." "Your mother," Shadowclaw said as they resumed their careful progress. "Tell me about her." Maya felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always accompanied thoughts of her parents. "She was an agricultural specialist. She and my father were hired to help establish sustainable farming systems on Demeter 7. They believed they could make a difference, help feed people who didn't have enough. They sound like honorable individuals. They were. Maya's voice caught slightly. They always said that helping others was the most important thing you could do with your life. That it didn't matter how small the gesture was if it came from the heart. Shadowclaw was quiet for several steps, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of understanding that hadn't been there before. I begin to see where you learned such values. Your parents raised a remarkable child, Maya Chen. They reached the access panel that would take them to the mid-levels, and Maya paused with her hand on the control pad. Beyond this point, they would be leaving the relative safety of the maintenance areas and entering spaces where their presence would be much harder to explain. Once we go through here, we'll be in public areas, she warned. Security is tighter, and there will be other people around. A lot of the residents in this section are humans, but there are also Centaurians, Andromedans, and a few other species. Most of them mind their own business, but some might report unusual activity to station security. Then we must ensure we are not seen as a threat, Shadowclaw replied. What would you suggest? Maya studied his massive form, trying to think of a way to make a 3-meter-tall alien warrior seem less intimidating. It was an impossible task, but perhaps there was another approach. Can you make yourself seem less dangerous? She asked. Not weak exactly, but maybe like you're not about to eat everyone you meet? Shadowclaw's scarred features shifted into what she was beginning to recognize as his version of a smile. I have spent the last 50 years being forced to appear docile and harmless for the entertainment of my captors. I believe I can manage a few more hours. The transformation was subtle but remarkable. The predatory tension in his posture relaxed. His ears shifted from alert scanning to a more neutral position, and somehow he managed to make his massive frame seem less threatening. He was still obviously a dangerous creature, but now he looked like one that was under control. That's actually pretty convincing, Maya admitted. Just remember to keep that up when we reach the clinic. Dr. Harrison is brave, but he's still human. They emerged from the service tunnel into a corridor that was markedly different from the industrial spaces they had left behind. The walls were clean and well-maintained, decorated with holographic displays showing news feeds and entertainment programming from across the galaxy. The lighting was warmer, designed to simulate natural sunlight rather than the harsh fluorescence of the lower levels. Maya felt a pang of nostalgia as they walked. This was how she remembered the station from her first arrival with her parents before everything went wrong. Back then, Kepler Station had seemed like a magnificent achievement of interspecies cooperation, a shining example of what different cultures could accomplish when they worked together. Now she knew better. The beauty of the upper levels was built on the suffering of those below, and the cooperation was more about mutual exploitation than genuine harmony. But Dr. Harrison's clinic represented something different, a small pocket of genuine compassion in an otherwise cynical environment. They passed several other beings in the corridor, including a family of Centaurians with their distinctive blue-tinted skin, and a pair of Andromedan traders whose crystalline features caught the light like living jewelry. True to Maya's prediction, most paid them little attention beyond curious glances at the unusual pairing of human child and alien warrior. The clinic occupied a modest storefront between a restaurant serving traditional Earth cuisine and a shop selling imported textiles from the vegan systems. A simple sign in multiple languages identified it as the Harrison Medical Center, all species welcome. Below that, in smaller text, was the motto that had first drawn Maya's mother to seek help there: healing has no barriers. Maya approached the entrance with a mixture of hope and anxiety. It had been months since she had seen Dr. Harrison, and she wasn't sure what kind of reception they would receive. The clinic's automated sensors detected their approach and slid the doors open with a soft chime. The waiting area was small but comfortable, with seating designed to accommodate a variety of body types and species. The walls were covered with medical certificates and holographic displays showing basic health information in dozens of languages. A few other patients waited for attention. An elderly human woman with a chronic cough, a young Rigelian whose chitinous shell showed signs of a nutritional deficiency, and a vegan merchant whose plant-like physiology required specialized care. Behind the reception desk sat a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and kind eyes. Maya recognized her as Dr. Harrison's assistant, though she couldn't remember the woman's name. The assistant looked up as they entered, and her expression shifted from professional welcome to shocked recognition. "Maya," she said, rising from her chair. 40, Maya Chen? My God, child, we thought you were dead. When your parents' transport was attacked, and there were no survivors reported, I managed to escape, Maya said quietly, aware of the attention their conversation was drawing from the other patients. "Is Dr. Harrison available? My friend here needs medical attention." The assistant's gaze shifted to Shadowclaw, and Maya watched her struggle to maintain professional composure. To her credit, the woman quickly recovered from her initial shock and focused on the obvious injuries. "Of course, dear. Let me get the doctor immediately." She pressed a button on her desk and spoke into a small communicator. "Doctor, you need to come out here right away. We have an emergency case. And, well, you'll want to see this yourself." Within moments, Dr. Marcus Harrison emerged from one of the treatment rooms. He was a tall, lean man in his 50s with prematurely gray hair and the kind of gentle demeanor that immediately put patients at ease. Maya had always thought he looked more like a scholar than a medical doctor, with his wire-rimmed glasses and slightly rumpled appearance. His face lit up when he saw Maya, but like his assistant, he quickly shifted to professional concern when he noticed her companion. "Maya! Thank the stars you're alive. We heard about the transport attack and feared the worst." He approached carefully, his experienced eye cataloging Shadowclaw's injuries even as he spoke. "And you must be her friend." "I'm Dr. Harrison." "I can see you're in considerable pain." Shadowclaw inclined his massive head respectfully. "I am called Shadowclaw, healer. The young one believes you might be willing to aid someone of my heritage." "All species are welcome here," Dr. Harrison replied firmly, though Maya could see the curiosity and concern in his eyes. "Though I must admit, I've never treated a Vorthak before. Your physiology is somewhat legendary in medical circles." "You know what he is?" Maya asked, surprised. "I know what the species used to be," Dr. Harrison corrected gently. "Vorthak warriors were renowned throughout the galaxy for their resilience and combat prowess. There are entire medical journals dedicated to studying their unique healing capabilities and biological adaptations." He paused, studying Shadowclaw more closely, though according to those same journals, the Vorthak have been extinct for decades. Rumors of our extinction have been greatly exaggerated. Shadowclaw rumbled with dry humor. "Though only barely, I fear." Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "Well, extinct or not, you're clearly in need of medical attention. That leg is badly set, and I can see signs of systemic infection from several untreated wounds." "Maya, how did you two meet?" Maya exchanged glances with Shadowclaw, unsure how much of their story to share. The ancient warrior made the decision for both of them. "Your young friend saved my life, Doctor. I was being held by slavers in the lower levels, left to die in conditions that would shock even hardened criminals. She risked everything to free me, though she had no reason to believe I was anything more than a dangerous predator." Harrison's expression darkened at the mention of slavers, and Maya saw something steel-hard flicker behind his gentle demeanor. "Slavers? On my station? I assume you've reported this to security?" "Station security is well compensated to look the other way when it comes to certain activities in the lower levels," Maya said carefully, "and the people involved made it clear that any interference would have serious consequences." "I see." Harrison was quiet for a moment, weighing his options. Finally, he seemed to reach a decision. "Well, regardless of the political complications, I have a patient who needs treatment. Let's get you back to the surgical suite, Shadowclaw. Maya, you can come too if you'd like." As they made their way to the back of the clinic, Maya felt a surge of gratitude for the doctor's willingness to help without asking too many questions. But she also sensed that their arrival had set larger forces in motion, and she wondered what consequences their presence might bring down on this good man who was risking so much to aid them. The surgical suite was larger than Maya had expected, equipped with advanced medical technology that could adapt to the needs of multiple species. Dr. Harrison guided Shadowclaw to an examination table that expanded automatically to accommodate his size. "I'm going to need to sedate you for the leg surgery," the doctor explained as he began a preliminary examination. "Your bone structure is incredibly dense, and the break is more complex than I initially thought. I'll also need to clean and dress these other wounds, some of which show signs of deliberate torture." Shadowclaw's eyes flashed dangerously at the last comment, but he nodded his acceptance. "Do what you must, healer. I have endured worse than whatever temporary discomfort your procedures might cause." Dr. Harrison prepared a sedative adapted for Vorthak's physiology, consulting his medical database to ensure the correct dosage. As he worked, he spoke quietly to Maya. "I want you to know that you and your friend are safe here, but I'm concerned about what might follow you. Slavers don't give up valuable property easily, and if they discover where you've taken him, we'll deal with that when it happens," Maya said, though she shared his concerns. "Right now, he needs help, and you're the only person I trust to provide it. Your mother was a remarkable woman, and I can see she raised an equally remarkable daughter." As the sedative took effect, and Shadowclaw's massive form relaxed into unconsciousness, Maya settled into a chair beside the examination table. Through the small window of the surgical suite, she could see the normal activity of the mid-level corridors continuing, oblivious to the drama playing out in the clinic, but she knew their respite was temporary. Kreshtar and his associates would not forget the humiliation they had suffered, and there were larger forces at work in the galaxy that would not welcome the return of a Vorthak warrior, even a supposedly broken one. Harrison began the delicate work of repairing decades of accumulated damage. Maya made a silent vow. She had saved Shadowclaw once, and she would do whatever it took to keep him safe. The ancient warrior had sworn to protect her, but she was beginning to understand that the bond between them went both ways. They were family now, chosen rather than born, forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual sacrifice. And families protected each other no matter what the cost. Outside the galaxy continued its ancient dance of power and politics, trade and warfare. But in this small clinic, surrounded by the quiet hum of medical equipment and the steady breathing of a healing legend, Maya felt something she had almost forgotten existed: hope for the future. His massive eyes opened with the instant alertness of someone who had learned never to trust even moments of vulnerability. The surgical suite's soft lighting revealed the extent of Dr. Harrison's work, and Maya watched as the ancient Vorthak tested his newly repaired leg with cautious movements. "The healing runs deeper than mere bone and tissue," he rumbled, his voice carrying a note of wonder. "I had forgotten what it felt like to move without constant pain." Dr. Harrison looked up from his medical scanner, satisfaction evident in his tired features. "Your species' healing factor is remarkable. What should have taken weeks of recovery has compressed into hours. The bone grafts have already begun integrating, and your immune system has cleared most of the systemic infections." Maya had spent the night in the clinic, curled up in a chair beside Shadowclaw's bed. The rhythm of his breathing had been more comforting than any lullaby. The first time in months, she had slept without fear of discovery. Now, watching him test his strength, she felt a mix of relief and growing anxiety about what would come next. "We can't stay here," she said quietly. "Kreshtar and his people will figure out where we went eventually. Harrison has already done enough for us." "The child speaks wisdom," Shadowclaw agreed, rising to his full height for the first time since his rescue. The transformation was startling. Where before he had been a broken shell of former glory, now he stood as something approaching his legendary stature. The repairs to his body had awakened something deeper, a sense of purpose that Maya could feel radiating from him like heat from a forge. Dr. Harrison set down his instruments and fixed them both with a serious look. Before you go anywhere, there's something you need to know. I've been monitoring station communications, and there's been unusual activity in the security networks. Someone with significant resources is putting pressure on the authorities to locate a stolen piece of exotic property. Maya's heart sank. She had hoped they might have more time before their enemies mobilized, but it seemed the galaxy's criminal networks moved faster than she had anticipated. "How long do we have?" Shadowclaw asked, already moving toward the small pile of equipment Dr. Harrison had provided them. "Hours, maybe less. I've prepared some supplies for you. Medical kits, nutrition bars, water purification tablets. There's also a small plasma cutter that might prove useful if you need to access maintenance areas or emergency shelters." Maya stared at the doctor in amazement. "You're helping us escape? But that could get you in serious trouble with the authorities." Harrison's expression hardened, revealing the steel beneath his gentle demeanor. "Maya, I've seen what slavers do to their victims. The medical evidence of torture on your friend's body tells a story that would horrify civilized beings across the galaxy. If the authorities on this station are willing to look the other way while such atrocities occur, then perhaps it's time for someone to take a stand." Shadowclaw studied the human doctor with new respect. "You risk much for strangers, healer." "Why?" "Because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing the safe thing," Dr. Harrison replied, echoing words that Maya remembered her parents saying. "And because I've seen what happens when good people do nothing in the face of evil." A soft chime from the clinic's security system interrupted their conversation. Dr. Harrison's assistant appeared on the communication screen, her face tight with worry. "Doctor, we have a problem. Station security is here with a search warrant. They're asking about an injured alien and a missing human child." "Stall them," Dr. Harrison ordered calmly. "Tell them I'm in the middle of a delicate procedure and can't be interrupted. We need 5 minutes." The screen went dark, and Dr. Harrison turned to Maya and Shadowclaw with urgent intensity. "There's an emergency exit through the surgical suite that connects to the maintenance tunnels. It's not on the station schematics, something I had installed when I first opened the clinic. Take the supplies and go. Now." Maya grabbed the pack of medical supplies while Shadowclaw tested the small plasma cutter. The ancient warrior moved with fluid grace despite his recent surgery, and she realized that Dr. Harrison's treatment had done more than just heal his wounds. It had restored something essential that had been broken along with his body. "What about you?" Maya asked as Dr. Harrison activated the hidden exit. "I'll handle the security team. They have no real evidence that you were here, and I've learned to be quite convincing when necessary." The doctor paused, his expression softening. "Take care of each other. And Maya, your parents would be proud of the person you've become." The hidden exit led to a narrow maintenance shaft that connected to the station's primary support systems. As they crawled through the confined space, Maya could hear voices from the clinic behind them. Dr. Harrison's calm tones contrasting with the harsh demands of the security officers. "He is a remarkable individual," Shadowclaw observed quietly as they moved away from the clinic. "To risk everything for beings he barely knows requires a kind of courage that many warriors would find enviable." "That's what humans do," Maya replied, surprised by the pride in her own voice. "At least, that's what the best of us do. My parents always said that our greatest strength wasn't our technology or our weapons. It was our willingness to help each other, even when it cost us everything." They emerged from the maintenance shaft 3 levels down from the clinic, in a section of the station that Maya didn't recognize. The corridors here were more utilitarian than the mid-levels, but still cleaner and better maintained than the industrial zones where she had been hiding. "Where do we go now?" she asked, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. Shadowclaw was examining a station schematic display, his enhanced senses processing information at superhuman speed. "The security forces will expect us to flee to the lower levels, where criminals traditionally hide. Instead, we should do something unexpected, like..." "What?" "We go up," he said with grim satisfaction, to the administrative levels, where the real power on this station resides. If we are to survive what's coming, we need allies with influence, not just hiding places. The administrative levels? That's where the station commander lives, where all the government offices are located. Security there will be incredible. Precisely why no one will expect us to go there, Shadowclaw replied. But more importantly, that's where we'll find the evidence we need to expose the corruption that allows slavers to operate with impunity. As they made their way toward the high-speed lifts that served the upper levels, Maya began to understand the scope of what Shadowclaw was proposing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice, about using their unlikely partnership to strike back at the system that had destroyed so many lives. The station commander is Admiral Chen Liu, Maya said, her mind racing through the possibilities. I met her once at a diplomatic reception my parents attended. She seemed, honorable, I suppose? But she'd never take the word of a fugitive child and an escaped slave against established station policy. Then we must provide her with evidence she cannot ignore, Shadowclaw replied grimly. The slavers keep records, Maya. Financial transactions, shipping manifests, communications with their buyers, all the documentation they need to operate their business. If we can access those records, we'd have to get into their computer systems, Maya finished, beginning to see the audacity of his plan. But that would mean going back to the lower levels, to their operations center. Not we, Shadowclaw corrected gently. I will go. You will remain in a safe location while I retrieve what we need. Maya stopped walking, forcing the ancient warrior to turn back and face her. No. We're partners in this, remember? You said the debt was binding, that we were connected now. That means we face the danger together. Shadowclaw's expression was unreadable, but Maya sensed the conflict beneath his controlled exterior. Finally, he nodded slowly. Your species continues to surprise me, young one. Very well, but if we do this, we do it properly. You will follow my lead, obey my instructions without question, and be prepared to run if I tell you to. Can you accept those conditions? I can, Maya replied, though she wasn't entirely sure what she was agreeing to. They reached the lift station that would take them to the administrative levels, but before they could access it, an alarm began echoing through the corridors. Maya's blood went cold as she recognized the pattern. It was a station-wide security alert, the kind reserved for the most serious threats. Attention all personnel! A mechanical voice announced over the station's communication system. We are conducting a search for 2 fugitives considered extremely dangerous. A human female juvenile, approximately 12 years old, traveling with a large alien of unknown species. These individuals are wanted in connection with theft and assault charges. Report any sightings immediately to station security. Theft and assault? Maya asked indignantly. What did we steal? What did we assault? The truth is often the first casualty in any war, Shadowclaw replied philosophically. They are painting us as criminals to justify whatever actions they plan to take against us. Maya's heart sank as she realized their plan to reach the administrative levels had just become infinitely more complicated. New plan? She asked hopefully. Shadowclaw studied the checkpoint with the tactical eye of someone who had spent centuries analyzing defensive positions. When he smiled, showing those deadly canine teeth, Maya knew she was about to witness something spectacular. Actually, he said with predatory satisfaction, I believe the original plan will work perfectly, but we may need to be slightly more direct in our approach than I initially intended. Before Maya could ask what he meant, Shadowclaw was moving. The transformation from injured refugee to apex predator was so complete and so sudden that even Maya, who had seen hints of his true nature, was caught off guard by the sheer physical presence he projected. The security guards at the checkpoint had perhaps 2 seconds to register the approaching threat before Shadowclaw was among them. Maya watched in fascination and horror as he moved through their positions like a force of nature, disabling weapons and neutralizing threats with surgical precision. Not a single shot was fired, Not a single alarm was triggered beyond those already echoing through the station. When the violence ended, 5 security officers lay unconscious on the floor, their weapons scattered and their checkpoint thoroughly compromised. Shadowclaw stood amid the destruction, not even breathing hard from the exertion. "The lift is clear," he announced calmly, as if he had just ordered coffee instead of single-handedly dismantling a military checkpoint. "Shall we proceed to the administrative levels?" Maya stared at him, trying to reconcile the gentle giant who had spoken so kindly about her parents with the unstoppable warrior who had just neutralized an entire security team in seconds. "How did you do that without killing anyone?" she asked as they stepped into the lift. "Because you taught me that there was value in mercy," Shadowclaw replied simply. 3 days ago, those guards would all be dead. Today, they will wake up with headaches and stories to tell their grandchildren. Your influence, young Maya, extends further than you might imagine. As the lift carried them toward the upper levels of the station, Maya realized that their partnership had changed both of them in ways neither had anticipated. She had given him hope and purpose. He had given her protection and the courage to fight back against impossible odds. But the battle for their freedom and for justice was just beginning. Somewhere in the station's administrative center, they would either find the evidence they needed to expose the truth, or they would discover that corruption extended even to the highest levels of authority. Either way, Maya thought as she watched the level indicators climb higher and higher, they would face whatever came next together. The last of the Vorthak and the human child who had saved him, united against a galaxy that seemed determined to crush anyone who dared to stand up for what was right. The hunt had begun, but Maya was no longer sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. The administrative levels of Kepler Station were a world apart from the industrial chaos below. Here, polished corridors gleamed under soft lighting, and the air carried the subtle scent of exotic flowers from the station's hydroponics gardens. Maya had only been here once before, during the diplomatic reception where she had met Admiral Chen Lu, and the memory felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. Now, as she and Shadowclaw moved through the corridors with stolen security passes and the confidence of those who belonged, she marveled at how perspective could transform a place. Where once she had seen magnificence and order, now she saw the comfortable isolation of power. The way beauty could be used to hide uncomfortable truths. "The Admiral's office should be in the Central Command section," Maya whispered as they passed a group of civilian administrators discussing budget allocations in hushed, urgent tones. "But getting to her won't be easy. She's probably got layers of security between her and anyone who might want to cause trouble." "Trust Teddy." Shadowclaw moved with predatory grace despite his massive size, somehow managing to seem less conspicuous among the station's upper-level population than he had in the industrial sections below. Maya suspected it was a psychological effect. People in positions of power were less likely to imagine threats coming from their own territory. "The direct approach has served us well thus far," he rumbled quietly. "But you are correct that Admiral Lu will be heavily protected. Perhaps it is time to consider an indirect strategy." They paused at an intersection, studying a holographic directory that showed the layout of the administrative complex. Maya's attention was caught by one particular listing, the communications center, responsible for all intersystem message traffic. "There," she said, pointing to the entry. "If we can access the communications logs, we can trace the messages between Kreshtar's organization and whoever's protecting them in the station hierarchy. Evidence like that would be impossible to ignore, even for someone who wanted to look the other way." Shadowclaw studied the directory with tactical interest. The communications center would be heavily secured, but it would also be staffed by technical personnel rather than military security. They would be less prepared for the kind of direct action that has proven effective so far. "You're not planning to hurt innocent people, are you?" Maya asked, suddenly concerned about the implications of their partnership with someone whose reputation was built on violence. The ancient warrior's expression softened, and she saw again the being who had spoken so gently about her parents' values. Your influence continues to guide my actions, young Maya. There are ways to accomplish our goals without causing permanent harm to those who are merely doing their jobs. They made their way toward the communications center through corridors that grew progressively more secure. By the time they reached their destination, they had passed through 3 different checkpoints, each one requiring identification and security clearance that should have been far beyond the reach of 2 fugitives. But Shadowclaw's stolen security pass, combined with his ability to project an aura of absolute authority when necessary, had proven remarkably effective. Maya was beginning to understand that confidence could be a more powerful weapon than any physical force, especially when backed by the subtle threat of violence that seemed to radiate from her companion like heat from a star. The communications center occupied an entire floor of the administrative complex, its banks of quantum processors and holographic displays managing the flow of information that kept the station connected to the broader galaxy. Maya counted at least 20 technicians working at various stations, their attention focused on data streams and communication protocols. "Too many people," she murmured to Shadowclaw as they observed from the entrance. "Even if we could get past the security checkpoint, there's no way to access the systems without being noticed by all those workers." "Then we create a distraction," Shadowclaw replied with grim satisfaction. "Something significant enough to draw most of the staff away from their stations, but not so dramatic as to trigger a full security lockdown." "What kind of distraction?" Before he could answer, an alarm began echoing through the communication center. But this was different from the general security alert that had been pursuing them. This was a priority emergency signal, the kind reserved for threats to the station's basic operations. Maya watched as technicians throughout the center suddenly became animated, their calm professionalism replaced by urgent activity. Display screens throughout the facility began showing system diagnostics and warning messages, and she heard fragments of conversation about power fluctuations and life support irregularities. "What's happening?" she asked. But Shadowclaw's attention was fixed on something beyond the communications center's main entrance. "We are no longer the only players in this game," he said grimly. "Someone else has decided to take direct action." Through the transparent walls of the center, Maya could see uniformed figures moving through the corridors with military precision. But these weren't station security personnel. Their equipment was too advanced. These were professional soldiers, and they were systematically taking control of the administrative complex. "Who are they?" Maya whispered, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Kreshtar's employers," Shadowclaw replied with the certainty of someone who had seen such operations before. "The real power behind the slaving operation. They have decided that subtle pressure and legal maneuvering are insufficient to resolve their problem." As if summoned by his words, a new voice echoed through the station's communication system. But this wasn't the mechanical tone of automated announcements. This was smooth, cultured, and absolutely confident in its authority. "Citizens and residents of Kepler Station," the voice began, each word precisely enunciated and carrying the weight of absolute power. "I am Director Vance of the Colonial Security Consortium. This station is now under emergency administration, pending resolution of a critical security matter." Maya felt her blood go cold. The Colonial Security Consortium was one of the most powerful corporate entities in the galaxy, with sufficient resources to buy and sell entire star systems. If they were involved in the slaving operation, then the corruption extended far beyond a few criminal organizations operating in the station's lower levels. "Effective immediately," Director Vance continued, "all civilians are ordered to remain in their current locations until further notice. We are seeking 2 fugitives who pose a significant threat to station security and interstellar commerce. Their capture is essential to maintaining the stability of this region." Shadowclaw's expression had shifted into something Maya had never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a kind of cold, calculating fury that suggested the true depths of his legendary reputation. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made her bones vibrate. "The Colonial Security Consortium," he said, each word dripping with contempt. I should have known. They were among my people's final enemies, the ones who turned our own honor against us and orchestrated our extinction. You mean they're responsible for what happened to the Vorthak? Not directly, but they provided the intelligence and resources that allowed our enemies to strike at the heart of our civilization. They profit from chaos, young Maya, and we have become an inconvenient reminder of their past crimes. The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. This wasn't just about one girl rescuing one alien from slavery. It was about covering up evidence of genocide, about protecting a conspiracy that had destroyed an entire species. The stakes were immeasurably higher than she had realized. Then we have to stop them, she said with a determination that surprised even herself. We have to expose what they've done, not just to us, but to your people. Shadowclaw studied her with ancient eyes that had seen the rise and fall of civilizations. You understand what you are suggesting? We would be challenging one of the most powerful organizations in the galaxy, beings with resources that dwarf the military might of entire star systems. They will not hesitate to destroy anyone who threatens their interests. Then we'd better make sure we succeed, Maya replied, echoing words she had heard her father say when facing impossible odds in his agricultural research. Because if we don't try, who will? The ancient warrior was silent for a long moment, and Maya sensed that he was weighing more than just their chances of survival. Finally, he nodded slowly, and she saw something kindle in his eyes that had been absent since his rescue. Not just purpose, but hope. Very well, young Maya. If we are to challenge the forces that destroyed my people and enslaved countless others, then we must do it properly. He gestured toward the communications center, where the technicians were still dealing with the cascading system failures. We will need allies, evidence, and a way to broadcast the truth before they can silence us permanently. She might not be able to help us directly, but if we can get the evidence to her, she'll have to act on it. Even the Colonial Security Consortium can't completely ignore a flag officer of the Terran Defense Force, assuming she is not already compromised, Shadowclaw pointed out. But you are correct that we need someone in authority who cannot be easily dismissed or eliminated. They moved toward the communications center as the last of the emergency response teams cleared the area. The system failures had drawn most of the technical staff away from their monitoring stations, leaving only a skeleton crew to maintain basic operations. It was the opportunity they needed, if they could act quickly enough. Shadowclaw disabled the remaining security checkpoint with casual efficiency, his movements so smooth and precise that the stunned guards had no time to raise an alarm. Within moments, Maya found herself standing before a quantum processing terminal that contained more information than she had ever imagined. I can access the communication logs, she said, her fingers flying over the holographic interface with the confidence of someone who had grown up in the digital age. But there's so much data here. It could take hours to find what we need. Then we focus on the most recent communications, Shadowclaw suggested, moving to guard the entrance while she worked. Kreshtar and his associates would have been coordinating with their superiors after our escape. Look for coded transmissions, financial transfers, anything that suggests a cover-up operation. Maya dove into the data streams, her enhanced pattern recognition allowing her to sort through massive amounts of information at superhuman speed. What she found there made her stomach turn. The slaving operation was just the tip of the iceberg. There were records of entire populations being sold into bondage, of governments being toppled to facilitate resource extraction, of species being driven to extinction for the crime of occupying valuable real estate. I've got it, she breathed, downloading terabytes of evidence onto a portable storage device. Everything, financial records, communication logs, operational plans. Enough evidence to bring down not just the local operation but the entire consortium network. Then we must ensure it reaches someone who can act on it, Shadowclaw replied, his enhanced hearing detecting approaching footsteps long before Maya could hear them. We have perhaps minutes before they locate us. Down. Maya finished the download and turned toward the exit. but froze as she saw the figures silhouetted in the doorway. Director Vance himself had arrived, flanked by a squad of heavily armed soldiers in powered armor. The corporate executive was exactly what Maya had expected. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of cold charisma that came from wielding absolute power. "The famous Shadow Claw," Vance said, his voice carrying the same smooth confidence she had heard over the station's communication system. "D. And his remarkable young companion. You have led us quite a chase. Not nearly as impressive as the chase your organization led against my people," Shadow Claw replied, moving to place himself between Maya and the armed soldiers. "Tell me, Director, do you sleep well at night knowing your profits are built on genocide and slavery?" Vance's expression didn't change, but Maya caught a flicker of something that might have been annoyance. The Vorthek extinction was a natural consequence of their refusal to adapt to changing economic realities. Your people chose warfare over commerce, honor over profit. Such choices have inevitable consequences. And what of the millions of innocent beings your organization has enslaved? What economic reality justifies that? Supply and demand? Vance replied with casual indifference. There is a market for labor, and we provide efficient distribution networks. The details of procurement are handled by our local contractors. Maya felt sick listening to the casual way he discussed human misery as if it were a commodity. But she also realized that he was providing them with exactly the kind of confession they needed, and the recording systems in the communications center were capturing every word. "You're recording this?" she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. "This entire conversation is being broadcast across the station's communication network." Vance's composed expression flickered for the first time, and Maya saw him glance toward his soldiers with something approaching uncertainty. "Terminate the recording systems, now." But it was too late. Throughout the station, on every communication channel and emergency broadcast frequency, the director's words were being repeated and analyzed. The truth about the Colonial Security Consortium's operations was spreading like wildfire through the galaxy's information networks. "You have made a grave error, children," Vance said, his voice now carrying the cold fury of someone whose carefully constructed empire was crumbling. "But it is one that can still be corrected. Surrender the data you have stolen, and perhaps we can reach an accommodation." "The only accommodation I'm interested in," Shadow Claw replied, his massive form tensing for combat, "is the one where you and your organization face justice for your crimes." "Then you have chosen poorly," Vance replied, gesturing to his soldiers. "Kill them both.